Welcome to week 2 of our class. Last week we downloaded and configured the Aptena Studio program to connect with a student server and import the textbook data files. It's important that you're able to accomplish that because this week we'll actively use the Aptena Studio program for our class assignments. If you've not yet configured Aptena Studio, please go back to last week's video on the topic within the week 1 video and supplemental materials folder. The primary focus of this week's materials include the use of forms in web pages. Forms are a critical method of interacting with the end user. Forms consist of a variety of input devices such as text fields, drop-down boxes, radio buttons, sliders, checkboxes, and more. You have learned about many of these fields in our earlier HTML course. This week we'll learn about some new form fields and how to make the forms more usable for the user and make the collected data more usable for the website operator. When you work with forms, it's important to understand the nature of the client-server relationship. When there's an interaction between multiple computers on a network, often it is a client-server relationship. The internet is an example of this. On the internet, there are clients and then there are servers. Anyone that uses a web browser, such as Internet Explorer, Microsoft Edge, Safari, Chrome, or Firefox, is generally considered a client or a user of the internet. Clients typically request things of servers. Anyone that provides content or services on the internet to clients are generally considered servers. The machines and software that provide web content are called web servers. Another way to say this is that the client is an internet user and the server is an internet supplier. As you progress with your work in HTML, you'll quickly learn how the client-server relationship works. It may be helpful to think about it as a relationship of a restaurant guest to a server in the restaurant. The client or guest in a restaurant asks the server for something, usually food or drink, and the client gets it if the server responds by giving the client what they're requesting. The same is true of a client-server relationship on a computer network. The person who is the client asks for some kind of data or information, and the server responds by giving the data or the information, often in the form of a web server providing a web page. For instance, if you're using a web browser as a client and you click on a link to a news article, that request is sent to a server that then responds by giving you the content of the news article. As long as the client asks for the right thing and the server has the ability to fill the request, everything goes as it should. But if the client asks for the wrong thing, or if the server is unable to fill the request, then things break. You may have heard of something called a 404 error. This is an example of something going wrong in a request to a server. A 404 error is also called a not found error. This can happen one of two ways. If a client asks for the wrong thing or in the wrong way, maybe a misspelling in a URL, the server gets the request, tries to find the content. When the content is not found, it responds with the status code of 404. On most server configurations, this results in the appearance of a not found page. Keep in mind that servers always respond to a request with a status code. Normally, if all goes well, the status code is called 200. The server looks at the request, finds the content, and responds with the status code 200. This basically means everything is okay, I have found what is being requested, and I'm passing it along. There are a lot of different status codes, and it's not important that you know them all. For now, you should know that a server always responds to a client request with a status code, and either good content or bad content. HTML forms are an important part of the client-server relationship. Forms allow a client to provide some type of structured or semi-structured data to the server that will help customize the content the server sends to the client. A form may ask for the age of a client. For example, This could be a beer or wine website where the client or end user is asked to provide their age or state if they are of a specific age. That information is then sent to the server, and the server uses the structured data to provide a customized experience. In the case of a site promoting alcohol, the person who answers with an age in excess of 21, the main site comes up. If the age provided is under 21, the server is programmed to not provide the requested content. While there are many ways to provide age data to a site like this, the structured nature of forms works really well for this type of interaction. Form processing can be done on the client side or on the server side. When processing is done on the server side, it means that all data is sent raw to the server, and the server processes this data based on programs that exist on the server. If the processing is done on the client side, it means that any calculations are done with a program on the client side in the web browser, using a program usually like JavaScript, without ever communicating the provided data back to the server. In this week's lesson, we'll learn that most modern forms do some basic data analysis on the client side using either a programming language called JavaScript or functions built directly into HTML5, and then they send the data to the server for additional processing using programs on the server. Those programs could go by names such as Ruby, PHP, or Perl. Take, for example, a form that allows a user to subscribe to a mailing list. The form may complete a simple check on the client side in the browser using JavaScript or built-in HTML5 functions to see if an email address was actually entered into the field before the submit button was pushed. Then, if the client-side review is positive, if everything looks all right, the email address is sent to the server, where more involved data processing, such as adding the email address to the actual email list, is completed. As you can see, the role of both the client and the server processing is important to forms with HTML on the World Wide Web. In this week's reading assignment, I make some specific and special notes about what file you should have open in Aptena when reading what portion of the textbook. It's my expectation that if the book tells you how a specific tag or attribute works, that you'll make a change to the file in Aptena and then test the file in a browser to see how the change impacts the file as it shows up in the web browser. Testing files in Aptena is pretty easy. Simply make an edit and click on the green circle with the white arrow in the icon bar. It's called the Run icon. If you've not already saved your file, you'll be prompted to do so. Once the file is saved, the document will open in the default web browser set by Aptena. You can add additional web browsers to the Aptena configuration or select non-default web browsers by just changing the configuration of Aptena. Let's take a look at how you can configure your favorite browser with Aptena Studio. Once we have Aptena open, we're actually going to work on a file for this demonstration within the Chapter 4 directory. We're going to specifically look at the Zookeeper form_revised file. Now I'm just going to make a really simple change here to show you how this will work. Before I make the change, I want to show you what it would look like to press that little white arrow within the green circle, the Run button in the icon bar. We'll push it right now, and when we do, we're going to activate Aptena to show the actual file we're working at in the default browser. In this case, you're seeing it in Firefox. This is how the file currently looks. You notice there's a legend item where it says contact details. We're going to change that a little bit here, and we're going to see how it looks in a web browser when launched from Aptena. So I'm going to go back to Aptena, And I'm going to look for contact details. I'm actually going to do a Control F for find. And we're going to look for contact details. And there it is. Instead of contact details, I'm going to put contact information. Then I'm going to hit the run button. As soon as I do, I get a notice saying it's been modified, but it hasn't been changed. Do you want to change it? And we're going to say yes. In just a moment, Firefox is going to come up. And you notice now, instead of, if we go back to the original where it said contact details, we can see that the name of the legend has been changed to contact information. I'm going to go ahead and go back to Aptena, change contact information back to contact details, press the button again. We're again told that the document's been changed or revised but not saved. Should we save it? We're going to say yes. And when we pull up the file in Firefox, we again see that it says contact details. Now this works great using the default mechanism within Aptena. The default mechanism means that one specific browser has been selected. So anytime this run button in the icon bar is pushed, the document that you're currently editing will then be shown in that particular browser. In HTML, you want to be able to quickly and frequently look at your work in multiple browsers. Because as you'll read in this week's assignment, and as you've been reading, not every function or feature of HTML5 is implemented in the same way or implemented at all in different browsers. So it's going to be important to look at your work in various web browsers. If you take a look at the down arrow to the right of the run button, you'll notice there's a couple different options shown. There's Firefox and Internet Explorer. The first option is going to be your default option. If all you do is push the button, you'll get the default option when your file is shown in a browser. If you were to instead click the down arrow and select Internet Explorer, the file you're working on would show up in Internet Explorer. Now let's say what you really want to show the file in is Safari or Opera or maybe even Chrome. How would you do that? I'm going to select Run Configurations. Notice there's a whole bunch of things in this list that we're not going to be using in this class, but we are going to be using web browsers. Again, here Firefox and Internet Explorer is shown. If I right-click on the category Web Browsers, I have the opportunity to add a new web browser. I'll do that now. You notice by default, it's saying that it wants to add Firefox. We want to add a different browser. We're going to search through our program files to find where Chrome is stored. It may be a little different on your computer, but I'm going to go into the file called Google, then into Chrome, then into Application, and then I'm going to select the chrome.exe file. I'll say Open. We're going to name this Chrome so it's easily identified on the menu, and I'm going to hit Apply. Then I'll close this particular dialog box. I'll go back to the down arrow next to the Run button on the icon bar, select Organize Favorites, Add, and you'll see that Chrome is now on this list. I'll push OK, OK here. Now when I push the down arrow next to the Run button, you'll see that Chrome is listed. And if I want to run this particular file that I'm working on in Chrome, I'll just select it. And you can see what happens. Now I see the same file in Chrome.